Now, before we proceed further, the request response website, we were looking at a lot of request methods over here, and the URI that we were hitting, let's say if I talk about this website itself, so how this URI is actually designed, we actually need to understand this thing. So URI basically consists of three parts. One is your base URI, then your base path, and then your end point, right? So in this, like, as I just added this thing, I have not added any further thing. So this is the base URI, right, which we also call it as a URL, a base URL, right? And if I talk about different requests on this like URL, then for getting a single user, we have a request like this. For getting list of users, we have a request like this for a particular page, right? If I don't want for a particular page, then even I can do it like this, right? This we have already seen. If I click on this, this will gonna give me the result of very first page itself, right? So this is for the list of users. We have this part, right, which is nothing but a get request, right? The method type used is get. To get a single user, again we have a request type as single user, again it is a get request, right? Then if I want to create a user, right, if we want to create a user, the request is this. So for create user, the request is this, and then the method type is post, right? So if you look over here, for creating the user, the method type, the API method type is post over here. Same way, if you want to update the user, so we want to update the record for the second user, right? So update user, we have the method type as put, right? And if we talk about deleting a user, the method type is delete. So we want, if I use this request delete user for the second user, then it will gonna delete the record for the second user, right? So if you look over here, in all these requests, the base URI, it remains same, right? So this thing contains the base URI part, right? And here this API or this users, if I talk about this users first, this is what our resource. So user is basically a resource through which we are retrieving the data, we are getting the information for a particular user, for the list of user, right? Or we are creating a user, we are updating a user, we are deleting a user. So we are, as I said, in case of web services, everything is a resource, right? So even if I talk about any website, it could be https example.com, then employees, and if I want the data for the employee with the ID 2, I'm gonna give this URI. So in this will remain as a resource. This employees is basically a resource, right? So this users over here is basically a resource, and this \API is a base path. Now it is again not mandatory that every URI will gonna contain a base path. At times the base path is not there, right? And this is what our endpoint is, right? The endpoint. This is the endpoint. Resource with a particular information for that particular user, or you want to send a get request, you want to send a delete request. Same way over here, if you see, this is basically your endpoint is, right? So once again, if I talk about this is your base URI, and this is your base path, and endpoint is always your resource. It starts from your resource. Resource could have some ID as well, right? Or it could be without the ID as well. So this is what your base URI, base path, and endpoint is. So this information is very important, right? So we are now getting familiarized with what an API is, how an API actually looks like, right? It is always HTTP request, HTTP or HTTPS request, right? And there are different method types for this request. That could be get, that could be post, that could be put, that could be delete, could be patch, could be a number of other things, right? So if you want to see what all method types are there, just click on this. You'll see a lot of method types over here, and most frequently used are get, post, put, patch, delete, right? At times of interviews, they may ask for like this head, these options, but if we talk about these are not very frequently used and asked, right? Majorly you're going to see these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 are very frequently used in the project, right? So we're going to have a detailed discussion around this. But yes, this is what we just discussed about the base URI, the base path, and the endpoint in a particular URI.